Welcome to The Explainer. We are tackling a huge one today, the entire history of the United States. We're going to look at how a handful of colonies grew into a global superpower and what major turning points really defined that journey.
So how are we going to do that? Well, we've broken it all down into 6 chapters. We'll start at the very beginning with origins, move to the nation's founding, and then get into the deep division that almost destroyed it. After that, we'll see its ascension into an industrial giant, its century as a superpower, and finally the challenges of modernity.
All right, let's dive in. And to really understand the United States, we can't just start in 1776. We have to go way, way back to a continent that was already home to incredible civilizations for thousands of years.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It really puts things into perspective. We're talking about culture shaping this land for millennia. And get this, by the 12th century, the city of Cahokia, right near modern-day St. Louis, was bigger than London was at the same time. Think about that. This was a land of complex, thriving societies long before any European showed up.
So, into this world come 3 major European players, and they all want something different. You've got Spain, looking for gold and converts, setting up military posts. You've got France, building a huge fur trading empire. But then there's England. Their whole game plan was different. They were focused on permanent settlements, on farming, profit, and religious freedom, and it was their approach that really set the stage for everything that came next. So, fast forward a bit. Within these English colonies, something really interesting starts to happen. People are starting to see themselves not just as British subjects, but as something new, something American. And well, that new identity was on a collision course with the king.
So how did it all blow up? Well, it was like this domino effect, right? Britons broke after a war, so they decided to tax the colonies. The colonists fire back with, hey, no taxation without representation. And instead of calming things down, Britain just clamps down harder, which only pushes the colonies from protest to all-out war. And this, right here, is the game changer. July 4th, 1776. This isn't just about breaking away. It's about announcing a whole new way of thinking about government. The idea that power, well, it comes from us, the people, not some monarch overseas. It was absolutely revolutionary for its time.
Okay, so they won the war. Great. Now what? The really hard part was taking all those big, beautiful ideas and actually building a country out of them. And that's where the Constitution comes in. It's this incredible blueprint for a government that's strong enough to work, but also has checks and balances all over the place to keep it from getting too powerful. But here's the thing. This brand new nation was built on a massive, glaring contradiction. All that talk of liberty and freedom, it didn't apply to millions of people. And that deep, deep hypocrisy was a ticking time bomb, especially as the country started to expand westward.
And what was driving all this expansion? This idea called manifest destiny. It was this belief, this conviction, that the U.S. was meant to control the continent from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And let's be clear, this wasn't just some poetic idea. It was used to justify a war with Mexico and the brutal forced removal of indigenous nations from their ancestral lands.
So with every single piece of new land, the same question came up, and there was no avoiding it. Is this going to be a free state or a slave state? This wasn't just politics. This was a battle for the very soul of the country.
And then, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln gets elected. And that's it. The whole thing just explodes. The Civil War wasn't just a war between armies. It was a war between 2 completely different worlds. You had the industrial North fighting to hold the country together, and the agricultural South fighting to protect its entire system, which was built on the backs of enslaved people.
The human cost was just staggering. We're talking about roughly 750,000 soldiers killed. That's more than any other war in American history. And while the Norse victory saved the Union and ended slavery on paper, the fight for what equality actually means, well, that was really just getting started. All right, so after the smoke clears from the Civil War, the country goes through this absolutely massive transformation. It goes from being this torn-up, mostly farming nation to an industrial giant, and it happens fast. So what fueled this explosion? People, millions and millions of them. Over 22 million immigrants came in just over 30 years. They were the ones working in the mines, the mills, the factories, building the new America. And all this created unbelievable wealth for some people. They called it the Gilded Age for a reason.
But gilded means it only looks golden on the surface, right? Underneath, there was a ton of corruption and massive inequality.
and that led to a backlash, the Progressive Era. This was a huge pushback from ordinary people demanding change. They wanted to use the government to bust up the giant monopolies, make things fairer, and give more power to the people. Things like letting us vote for our own senators, and after a long, hard fight, finally giving women the right to vote.
So, as we flip the calendar into the 1900s, America is this new economic behemoth. But it can't just stay in its own backyard anymore. Two massive world wars are on the horizon, and they are going to drag the U.S. onto the global stage in a way that will change everything, forever.
You can really see the shift here. In World War I, the U.S. kind of gets involved late in the game, but by World War II, it's a central player. And when the dust settles from that war, the world looks completely different. There are basically two giants left standing, the U.S. and the Soviet Union, and that kicks off a whole new kind of conflict, the Cold War.
And the whole game for the next 40-plus years was driven by one word: containment. The U.S. foreign policy was all about stopping communism from spreading, no matter what. And that one idea, that doctrine, led directly to bloody, controversial wars in places like Korea and Vietnam.
But what's so fascinating is that while this massive global struggle was going on, there were huge battles being fought right at home. You had the civil rights movement fighting to make the country live up to its own ideals of equality. And then you had the women's rights movement, the gay rights movement, the huge protests against the Vietnam War. All of these were challenging the status quo and asking, what does freedom in America really mean?
So then, in 1991, the Berlin Wall has fallen, the Soviet Union dissolves, and just like that, the Cold War is over. People were talking about the end of history, like all the big conflicts were done. Well, that didn't last long. A whole new and maybe even more complicated set of problems was right around the corner.
I mean, look at the start of the 21st century. First, the 9/11 attacks, which completely changed everything and started the war on terror. Then in 2008, a massive financial crisis that nearly cratered the world economy. And more recently, a global pandemic on top of incredibly deep political divisions at home. It's just been one major test after another.
When you look back at it all, maybe the one thing that's always been true about American history is this cycle of conflict and reinvention. It's this constant argument over land, over who we are, over what those words written back in 1776 are supposed to mean. The country seems to fall apart and then tries to piece itself back together. So that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? As we face all these new challenges, both from outside and from within, what is the next chapter of that story going to look like?
Discover review on mathematics in just 7 minutes. Check out our quick and insightful video on the essence and domains of mathematics, a powerful overview packed into just 7 minutes and 2 seconds. Want more? Explore our All Videos playlist featuring a variety of informative, entertaining, and educational content designed to spark curiosity and fuel your YouTube journey. Whether you're here to learn or be inspired, our videos are crafted to be trendy, engaging, and optimized to thrive in the YouTube algorithm.